Frank Reynolds had always prided himself on his work ethic, but at 70 years old he found himself in a position that no one would have expected him to occupy. As he pushed the mop across the polished floor of Tech Vibe Solutions, a fast-paced tech startup he had founded decades earlier, he could feel the weight of age creeping into his bones. The laughter and chatter of the young employees echoed around him, but they rarely acknowledged his presence. Most of the time they were too absorbed in their own world, their phones glued to their hands, and their heads buried in screens. It was a typical Wednesday morning when the first barbs of disrespect hit Frank. He was cleaning the break room, the smell of stale coffee hanging in the air, when a group of programmers burst in, animatedly discussing the latest gaming technology. Frank stood quietly in the corner, his mop still, while they shared jokes and jibes about everything from the weekend's esports championship to the latest meme. One of them, a brash young man named Jake, caught sight of Frank and let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Look at the old janitor. Shouldn't you be at home playing bingo or something?" Jake smirked, and his friends joined in, chuckling at their own cruelty. Frank's heart sank, but he forced a smile, reminding himself that he had taken this job to stay connected with the younger generation and contribute, even in a small way. "Just keeping things tidy," he replied, his voice steady despite the hurt curling in his chest. As they moved on, dismissing him as quickly as they had noticed him, Frank felt the sting of their laughter linger in the air. He shook his head and resumed his cleaning, pushing down the bitterness that rose within him. How had he fallen so far from the days when he was the one calling the shots, steering the ship of a company that had once thrived under his leadership? Later that afternoon, Frank stood in the conference room, methodically wiping down the glass surfaces while overhearing snippets of conversation from the team preparing for a major software launch. He could hear the young employees' excitement mixed with a certain arrogance, and the flashbacks of his own successes surged forward. He had led groundbreaking projects, innovated in a rapidly changing industry, and mentored many of the now ignorant faces that passed him by daily. The laughter had turned into an echo of doubt. What had happened to this company? The idea that he had founded, now run by a generation that seemed intent on ignoring the lessons of experience, filled him with frustration. He resolved to speak up in the next staff meeting, believing that his insights might still hold value. But when the time came, Frank's attempts to contribute fell flat. During the safety training session called by Sarah, the young manager who had been brought in to shake things up, he mustered the courage to share his thoughts on an observed safety flaw he had noticed during his mop rounds. As he started to speak, Frank felt a wave of hope that maybe, just maybe, his experience would be acknowledged. Instead, he was met with a chorus of laughter from the back of the room. "What does the old janitor know about safety?" Jake quipped again, and the room erupted. Sarah, rather than encouraging Frank, smiled at the joke and gestured for him to sit down. Frank's heart sank further as humiliation washed over him. He left the room, head down, swallowing the anger and sadness swelling in his chest. The next day, things took a turn. Frank was tidying up the kitchen area when he overheard Sarah and Jake in hushed voices, discussing the impending software launch and their concerns about security protocols. "We can't afford to have the old guy meddling in our business," Sarah said, her tone dismissive. "He doesn't understand how things work anymore." The disdain in her voice made Frank's blood boil. He had worked hard to build this company and was now reduced to an irrelevant shadow in the eyes of those he had once called colleagues. Frank couldn't take it anymore. That evening, after another exhausting day of cleaning up after those who had once looked up to him, he decided he had to document his thoughts. He took out a small notebook he had tucked into his janitorial cart and began jotting down everything he had observed over the past week: the lack of safety measures, the dismissive attitudes, and the blatant disregard for the company's foundational values. As he wrote, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps if he could gather enough evidence, he could present it in a more formal way. Maybe he could turn this around. He imagined how empowering it would feel to stand before the staff, not as the janitor, but as a leader ready to reclaim his voice. The following day, Frank decided to take the plunge. He wore a shirt that was a bit more polished than usual, trying to project a semblance of authority. As he made his way to the break room, he spotted Jake and Sarah huddled over their phones, laughing again. Frank took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and approached them. "Can we talk about the safety protocols?" he asked, his voice steady. Jake looked up, feigning surprise. "Sure, what do you want to say, old man?" The laughter of the two rang in Frank's ears, but he pressed on. "I've noticed some things that could put the company at risk, and I believe they should be addressed before the launch." "Why should we care what you think? You're just the janitor," Sarah replied sharply, her tone laced with derision. The laughter continued, and Frank's heart sank. That evening, as he returned to his small apartment, Frank reflected on the day. The loneliness crept in, gnawing at him. He was no longer the proud business owner, but rather a relic in a world that had moved on without him. But deep down, Frank knew that the knowledge he had gathered through years of hard work was still valuable. His resolve strengthened as he sat at the small table, pen in hand, continuing to document not just observations but also potential solutions for the flaws he had identified. With each word, he began to envision a path forward, one where he would not only address these issues, but also demonstrate his competence to those who had dismissed him. As he turned off the light and settled into bed, Frank was jolted awake by the shrill sound of the fire alarm. A thick haze of smoke filled the hallway of his apartment complex, forcing him out into the open air. His heart raced as he recognized that this situation could easily become a real emergency if someone did not act quickly. The next day at Tech Vibe Solutions, the staff was called into an emergency meeting. The loud blaring of the fire alarms had echoed through the building the previous day, and they had learned that the false alarm was due to a fault in the emergency system. Frank took a deep breath as he entered the meeting room, deciding that this would be his moment to make a difference. But as he stood at the back, the younger employees scoffed at the very thought of him participating. Frank's hands shook slightly, but he forced himself to step forward, gathering the courage to present the evidence he had collected. As he began to speak, an unexpected fire broke out from faulty equipment in the building, setting off chaos among the employees. In that moment of crisis, everything changed. Employees scrambled for exits, their panic revealing the disarray in their training and safety procedures. Frank's heart raced as he took charge. He moved swiftly, guiding people toward the nearest emergency exits and away from the thickening smoke. His instincts kicked in as he began directing traffic, using the skills he had honed over the years. As he helped usher the last of the employees out of the building, the harsh realities of the day finally bore down on him. There was no more room for doubt or hesitation. This was his moment to reclaim his authority, and he wouldn't let it slip away. After the chaos subsided, and once everyone was safely outside, the realization of the disarray settled in. Frank stood at the center of the gathering crowd, a mixture of adrenaline and determination coursing through him. The truth about the security failures loomed large, and he knew that now was the time to act decisively. He had seen firsthand how complacency had endangered everyone, and he could no longer hide in the shadows. Frank felt a fire igniting within him, not of fear, but of purpose. He would speak up, and he would do so boldly, not just for himself, but for the safety of everyone at Tech Vibe Solutions. As he watched the chaos around him and the employees finally beginning to appreciate the gravity of the situation, Frank knew that the winds of change were about to blow. This was only the beginning. The following day, the sun rose with an unusual brightness, illuminating the exterior of Tech Vibe Solutions, but within its walls, the tension lingered thickly in the air. Frank Reynolds had taken the last 24 hours to reflect on the chaos of the fire and how it had propelled him into a leadership role, however accidental. He could sense that the staff's perception of him was shifting, even if only slightly. Now was the time to capitalize on that momentum. As he arrived early, the hum of the office was muted. Many employees were still processing the previous day's events. Frank busied himself with his usual cleaning tasks, but his mind was already formulating a plan. He wanted to approach Sarah, the young manager, to discuss the critical safety issues he had noted before the fire. Maybe now she would be more receptive to his ideas. Once the office filled with more employees, Frank saw Jake and Sarah chatting in the corner, their voices low but filled with an undercurrent of concern. He felt a surge of determination. Today he would assert himself. After finishing his cleaning duties, he took a deep breath and made his way over to them. "Excuse me, Sarah, do you have a moment to talk?" Frank asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Jake looked at him with disdain, raising an eyebrow as if expecting another futile attempt. "What's the janitor got to say that's worth our time?" he snickered, but Frank held his ground undeterred. "Actually, it's important. I believe we need to address the safety protocols immediately before we move forward with the launch. Yesterday was a wake-up call," Frank stated firmly. Sarah looked taken aback. The previous day's panic had shifted the atmosphere, and now she nodded slowly. "All right, let's discuss this in my office." Jake scoffed, rolling his eyes as they walked away. Frank felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, but he steeled himself for what lay ahead. As he entered Sarah's office, he noted the clutter of papers strewn across her desk, a sign of her chaotic management style. "Please, take a seat," she said, motioning toward the chair opposite her. Frank sat, feeling the shift in dynamics as the door closed. "I know I'm not in a position of authority here," Frank began, "but I have significant experience in safety protocols, and I believe my insights could help prevent any future incidents. Yesterday was a direct result of ignoring the issues I've been trying to raise." Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "I understand, Frank, but you have to realize that this is a new world. Things operate differently now, and we don't need to overreact. The fire was just a malfunction. These things happen." Frank held her gaze, unyielding. "That's exactly the problem. You're dismissing what could be a serious oversight. If you look at the emergency exits, you'll see they're blocked. That's a safety hazard. Plus, the alarm system has issues. We need a thorough review before we put anyone's life at risk." Sarah seemed to waver slightly, her confidence beginning to crack. "I'll take your suggestions under advisement," she replied, though her tone was far less enthusiastic than it could have been. "Can we involve the team in this process? A collaborative approach might help everyone understand the gravity of the situation," Frank suggested, pushing forward. "Fine, I'll consider it. But you need to understand your place, Frank. You're here to support us, not dictate policy," she retorted, trying to regain her authoritative tone. "Understood," Frank replied, masking his frustration. He stood up, determined to keep the door open for future conversations. As he left her office, he felt a mix of hope and unease. They had made some progress, but he needed to do more to ensure the company recognized the importance of these issues. Over the next few days, Frank worked diligently, using every opportunity to engage with employees. He greeted them warmly, offering his insights in casual conversations, trying to build rapport. He started to notice subtle changes in how they treated him. There was less mocking and more curiosity about his thoughts on various topics. One afternoon, as he was restocking supplies in the break room, a young intern named Lily approached him. "Hey Frank, I heard you used to run this place. Is that true?" she asked, her eyes wide with interest. "Yep, that was a long time ago," he said, allowing himself a smile. "It's a different world now, but I'm still here to help however I can." "That's really cool. What was it like?" she pressed, genuinely intrigued. Frank found himself animatedly sharing stories about the early days of the company, the challenges they faced, and the innovations they brought to life. As he spoke, he noticed several employees gathering around, drawn in by his storytelling. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of belonging. The tide was beginning to turn, and he could feel it in the air. However, despite the small victories, he remained acutely aware of the larger challenges that loomed. Frank knew that Sarah was still hesitant about implementing any of the safety recommendations he had proposed, which only added to his determination. He realized that he had to escalate his efforts. The turning point came when Frank decided to call a meeting of his own. He sent an email to the entire staff, inviting them to a safety and collaboration session he would host in the main conference room. His heart raced at the thought of standing in front of his former employees, but he also felt a surge of confidence. He wanted to create an environment where everyone felt empowered to contribute, and it was time to take a stand. When the day of the meeting arrived, Frank felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He arrived early, setting up the room and preparing a presentation that highlighted the safety protocols he had developed during his years in the industry. As employees trickled in, he noticed a curious energy among them. Sarah entered the room just as Frank was setting up his laptop. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm leading this meeting, as discussed. I think it's important for everyone to understand the risks we're facing and the steps we can take to mitigate them," Frank replied, keeping his voice steady. "Just remember your place, Frank. I'll be watching," she said, her eyes narrowing as she took a seat in the back, arms crossed. Undeterred, Frank began the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you are excited about the upcoming launch, but I want to take this opportunity to discuss our safety protocols and ensure we are all on the same page." As he spoke, he could see the shift in the room. Employees leaned forward, some taking notes, others nodding along as he pointed out specific areas that needed improvement. Frank felt a growing sense of confidence. He was no longer just a janitor, but a leader with valuable insights to share. "After the fire alarm incident, it's become clear that we need to take our safety practices more seriously," he continued. "I have been compiling a list of recommendations based on what I've seen and experienced, and I'd like to share those with you now." He launched into his presentation, outlining the flaws in the current system and providing clear, actionable steps for improvement. As he spoke, he encouraged questions and feedback, fostering an open dialogue. To his surprise, many employees chimed in with their own concerns and suggestions, creating a collaborative atmosphere he had longed for. After the meeting, as employees filtered out, Frank felt invigorated. For the first time, he had seen his coworkers actively engaged, discussing safety measures among themselves. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. However, as the excitement of the meeting began to settle, Frank spotted Jake leaning against the wall, arms crossed, a smirk plastered across his face. "Nice little show you put on there, old man. Think you're running things now," he taunted. Frank felt his stomach churn. "This isn't a joke, Jake. People's lives depend on us doing this right." "Oh, please, spare me the lecture. You might have been the boss once, but you're just a janitor now. Remember that?" Jake sneered, pushing past him. The confrontation left Frank rattled, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had made progress, and that was what mattered. He was determined to keep moving forward, no matter the opposition. Over the next week, Frank worked tirelessly to follow up on the ideas that had emerged from the meeting. He organized small discussion groups, inviting employees to brainstorm further on safety and operational improvements. To his delight, people were increasingly receptive. They began to see him as a mentor rather than a mere janitor. One afternoon, as he sat in the break room, reviewing feedback from one of the discussion sessions, Lily approached him again. "Frank, I really enjoyed the last meeting. Your insights are helping us rethink how we operate. I think we all appreciate you stepping up," she said, sincerity radiating from her voice. "Thank you, Lily. I just want to make sure everyone feels safe and valued here," he replied, his heart warming at her acknowledgement. As the days rolled into weeks, Frank noticed a palpable shift in the office environment. Employees began greeting him with smiles and nods of respect. They sought him out for advice, and he felt more connected than ever. Even Sarah, though still guarded, had started to consult him on certain decisions, showing a glimmer of recognition of his expertise. Yet, in the midst of this progress, the dark undercurrent of Jake's animosity remained. Frank could sense that the young programmer was plotting something. There was a lingering tension that suggested Jake felt threatened by the newfound dynamics. Frank kept his guard up, knowing that despite the advancements, he had to stay vigilant. The culmination of their efforts came with a scheduled all-hands meeting to discuss the upcoming launch, where Frank was invited to present his safety recommendations to the entire staff. His heart raced at the thought of standing in front of everyone, but he also felt a profound sense of purpose. On the day of the meeting, Frank prepared thoroughly, determined to make a lasting impression. As he stood in front of the assembled employees, he could see a mix of curiosity and skepticism in their eyes. He took a deep breath, mentally reminding himself that he had worked hard to earn this moment. "Thank you all for coming," Frank began, his voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. "Today, I want to discuss how we can ensure our upcoming launch is not only successful but safe for everyone involved. We've made significant strides in our discussions over the past few weeks, and I'm excited to share my proposals with you." He launched into his presentation, detailing the improvements to the safety protocols he had championed. As he spoke, Frank noticed Sarah nodding along, which bolstered his confidence. He highlighted the areas where they could improve and emphasized the importance of a culture of safety within the organization. However, as he neared the end of his presentation, Jake stood up, interrupting him. "You really think you're the expert here, don't you, Frank? You've got a lot of nerve telling us how to do our jobs," he sneered, arms crossed defiantly. Frank felt a jolt of anger surge through him, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not here to dictate how you work, Jake. I'm sharing my experience and knowledge to help protect us all. This isn't about ego, it's about safety." The room buzzed with murmurs as employees glanced between Frank and Jake, tension hanging heavy in the air. Frank took a moment to let the silence settle before continuing. "I hope we can all see that collaboration is key. We're a team, and we need to work together to ensure our success. That starts with looking out for one another." As the meeting concluded, Frank felt a mix of triumph and apprehension. He had stood his ground, and the support he received from his coworkers encouraged him. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that Jake wouldn't back down easily. That evening, as he cleaned up the conference room, Frank overheard snippets of conversation from the departing employees, a buzz of approval for his presentation. He allowed himself a small smile, but the nagging sense of unease returned when he noticed Jake lingering at the door, a dark expression on his face. "Enjoy the spotlight while you can, old man," Jake said menacingly before leaving. Frank's heart sank, but he shook off the unease. He had worked too hard to let anyone intimidate him now. Little did he know Jake was brewing a plan that would soon put Frank's resilience to the ultimate test. As Frank exited the building that night, he glanced back at the brightly lit windows of TechVib Solutions, filled with hope for the future. He had found his voice, and he was determined to continue fighting for the safety and respect that every employee deserved. But the battle was far from over, and as he stepped into the cool night air, Frank sensed that darker challenges lay ahead. The winds of change were stirring, and he would need to stand firm against whatever came next. The following week at TechVibe Solutions was a whirlwind of activity, the excitement of the impending software launch palpable in the air. Employees buzzed about the office, and for the first time in months, Frank Reynolds felt an overwhelming sense of optimism. He had witnessed a shift in how people viewed him, and he was determined to leverage that newfound respect to further instill a culture of safety and collaboration. Frank was busy setting up the meeting room for a follow-up discussion on safety protocols when he heard raised voices coming from the nearby break room. Curiosity piqued, he carefully placed the chairs he was arranging back in their original positions and made his way toward the commotion. As he approached, he recognized Jake's voice, its sharpness cutting through the usual office hum. "And it's ridiculous that we're even listening to him. Just because he used to own this place doesn't mean he knows what's best for us now." Jake's voice was filled with disdain, and it dripped with an edge of aggression. Frank paused just outside the door, straining to hear more. He could see through the glass panel that several employees, including Sarah, were gathered, their expressions a mix of concern and uncertainty. "Jake, I understand you're frustrated, but Frank is just trying to help us. He has valuable experience," Sarah replied, attempting to diffuse the situation. Frank felt a flicker of hope that she might truly be starting to see his worth. "Help? He's just a janitor now. He should stick to mopping floors and let us handle the real work," Jake shot back, and the tension in the room escalated. Frank's heart sank as he listened to the dismissive words, but he also felt the urge to confront Jake. This was not the environment he wanted to cultivate. It needed to change, and it needed to change now. Gathering his resolve, Frank stepped into the break room. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him, a mix of surprise and unease washing over the gathered employees. Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a defiant smirk on his face. "Just discussing the importance of sticking to our roles, Frank. You might want to remember that you're not the boss anymore." Frank held his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I'm aware of my position, Jake, but my experience still matters, and the safety of our workplace is paramount. It's about collaboration, not hierarchy." "Collaboration? You mean you dictating how we should work? You don't know our struggles," Jake scoffed, his arrogance fueling his bravado. "You're out of touch with what we actually do here." The tension in the room thickened as Frank struggled to keep his composure. "This isn't about me, and it's not about you. This is about ensuring that everyone goes home safe. We're a team, and that means respecting each other's input, regardless of our titles." At that moment, Sarah spoke up. "Frank is right. We need to focus on making sure we're prepared for the launch and that we're all aware of our responsibilities when it comes to safety. I appreciate the feedback he's been providing, and it's time we take it seriously." Jake's expression soured, and he pushed away from the counter. "You can't seriously believe he's qualified to dictate our process. We've built something here that's thriving, and now we have to listen to an old janitor's opinions." Frank felt the anger boil within him but fought to keep it in check. He turned to the group, his voice rising with conviction. "You're right that this company has thrived, but that's partly because we've built a solid foundation over the years. If we ignore the cracks that have formed, we risk everything we've worked for." With that, Frank walked out of the break room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. He didn't want to show how much Jake's words had affected him, but the dismissal stung deeply. As he returned to his cleaning duties, Frank reminded himself that the tide was slowly turning, and he couldn't let one person's arrogance derail his progress. Later that week, the staff held a pre-launch meeting to finalize the plans for the upcoming product rollout. Frank was present, knowing this was another opportunity to solidify his role in the company's culture. He took his seat in the corner of the room, where he could see everyone without being obstructive. As the meeting progressed, Frank watched the interactions carefully. Sarah facilitated the conversation, discussing timelines and responsibilities. But whenever Frank attempted to interject with safety reminders or concerns, Jake would dismiss him with a wave of his hand or a sarcastic remark, attempting to undermine his credibility in front of the team. At one point, Sarah introduced the topic of the safety protocols Frank had previously proposed. "I want to emphasize that we have taken some feedback regarding our safety measures into account. Frank has done a thorough job observing and identifying potential risks," she said, her voice calm. "Why do we need to listen to him? He's just a janitor," Jake interrupted, the condescension in his tone blatant. The tension in the room was palpable as several employees shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. caught between supporting Frank and siding with Jake's popular bravado. Frank inhaled deeply, his heart racing. He felt the urge to withdraw but knew he couldn't allow Jake's bullying to silence him. I may be a janitor, but I'm also someone who has dedicated his life to this company. I want to ensure that you all can continue to thrive in a safe environment, he said firmly. Jake's eyes narrowed, and Frank could see the fury building beneath his bravado. Just because you worked here once doesn't mean you get to dictate our work now, old man. Jake spat, leaning back in his chair defiantly. Frank's resolve hardened. This isn't about control. It's about protecting lives, including yours. If you think my input is irrelevant, you're mistaken. I care about the well-being of every person in this room. Sarah attempted to steer the conversation back to the agenda, but Frank felt the momentum shift against him. He could sense Jake rallying some of the younger employees to his side, whispering dismissive comments. The tension escalated, and Frank realized he needed to take decisive action. After the meeting, Frank approached Sarah in her office. We need to address this head-on. If we allow Jake to undermine safety protocols and disrespect contributions, it will breed resentment in the workplace, he urged, concern etched across his face. I understand your frustration, Frank, but it's a tricky situation, Sarah replied, her brow furrowed. Jake has a strong influence over the team, and I don't want to create more divisions. Then let's work together to set boundaries. We need to reinforce that safety is a priority for everyone, and it's time we stop letting Jake dictate the narrative, Frank insisted, determination filling his voice. Reluctantly, Sarah nodded. You're right. Let's set up a team meeting to address this directly. I'll take the lead, but I need you there to support the message. As the meeting was scheduled, Frank felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. He understood that confronting Jake would be challenging, but he believed it was necessary for the good of the company. The day of the meeting arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Employees filed into the conference room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to apprehension. Frank stood at the front, ready to support Sarah in delivering the message. Thank you all for coming, Sarah began, her tone serious. I want to address some of the concerns that have arisen since our last meeting, particularly regarding our safety protocols and the importance of collaboration in our work environment. Frank stood by her side, his presence a silent testament to the importance of the discussion. Sarah continued, outlining the safety measures that had been proposed and emphasizing the need for everyone's input. Frank has been a valuable resource in highlighting areas we need to improve upon, and I want to ensure that we foster an environment where everyone feels respected and heard, she stated. Jake's expression darkened as he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Frank could feel the tension rising again, but he was ready to confront it. I'd like to add, Frank interjected, taking a step forward, that respect and safety are intertwined. If we disregard contributions based on someone's current position, we risk fostering a toxic work environment. This isn't about hierarchy, it's about our collective well-being. As he spoke, he could see a few employees nodding in agreement, and he felt a rush of encouragement. Jake's scowl deepened, but he remained silent for the moment. I encourage everyone to share their thoughts on how we can improve safety protocols, Frank continued. Let's work together as a team to ensure our workplace remains secure. The discussion began, and to Frank's surprise, many employees opened up about their concerns. Ideas flowed freely as they brainstormed solutions together. Frank felt a swell of pride as he saw the camaraderie beginning to develop among his coworkers. However, it was clear that Jake was seething. He finally broke his silence, lashing out. This is absurd. We're listening to a janitor tell us how to run our company. This is a tech startup, not a retirement home. Frank felt the air grow thick with tension as Jake's words struck a nerve. Jake, this isn't about who has what title. It's about making sure we're doing our jobs safely and effectively, Frank said, refusing to back down. You think you're so important just because you have some old school ideas, Jake replied. Frank stood at the front of the conference room, feeling the tension mount as Jake continued to challenge him. You think you're so important just because you have some old school ideas, Jake sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Newsflash, we're not living in the past anymore. This is a tech company, and we need to move forward, not backward. Frank's heart raced, anger boiling within him. Jake, this isn't about nostalgia or clinging to outdated practices. It's about keeping everyone safe and ensuring we don't overlook the basics. Ignoring the realities of safety can lead to catastrophic consequences. The room was silent as employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Frank could feel their eyes darting back and forth between him and Jake, caught in a battle that seemed to deepen the divide within the team. He took a deep breath, knowing he had to maintain control of the situation. Look, I understand that change can be intimidating, Frank continued, his voice steady but passionate. But we owe it to ourselves and each other to prioritize safety above all else. If you're not willing to listen to valid concerns, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. Failure? All I see is you trying to push your agenda, Jake shot back, crossing his arms defiantly. You're just a janitor now, Frank. It's time to accept that and stop pretending you know what's best for us. Frank felt the sting of those words, but he refused to let them derail him. My title doesn't diminish my experience or the knowledge I've gained over the years. I'm still the same person who built this company from the ground up, and I care deeply about its future. I want to see us succeed, but that means listening to everyone regardless of their position. As Frank spoke, he noticed a few nods of agreement among the employees. Encouraged, he pressed on. Safety isn't just a checkbox on a list. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels responsible for one another. If we can't do that, then we're not truly a team. The atmosphere in the room began to shift as employees contemplated Frank's words. Sarah, who had been observing the exchange, finally chimed in. Jake, I appreciate your passion, but we can't dismiss Frank's contributions. We've seen how quickly things can escalate, and we need to be proactive. Jake opened his mouth to protest but paused, seemingly caught off guard by Sarah's support. Frank seized the moment. Let's work together to establish a safety committee, a group where all voices can be heard. We can gather feedback, review protocols, and ensure everyone's concerns are addressed. It's about collaboration, not division. Jake's expression shifted as he realized he was losing the battle. Fine, but don't expect me to take orders from someone who mops floors for a living, he replied, his tone filled with resistance but less aggressive than before. Frank took a step closer, refusing to back down. This isn't about orders. It's about responsibility. If we're going to succeed, we need to work together as a unified team. It starts now. As the meeting wrapped up, Frank felt a surge of relief. They had made progress, and despite Jake's resistance, he could sense a shift among the other employees. For the first time, they were rallying around a common cause, and Frank couldn't help but feel proud. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as the safety committee took shape. Employees from various departments signed up to participate, eager to engage in discussions about safety and collaboration. Frank felt a renewed sense of purpose as he met with the committee, exchanging ideas and brainstorming ways to improve their work environment. However, as the momentum built, Jake's animosity continued to simmer beneath the surface. Frank noticed subtle attempts by Jake to undermine the committee's efforts, spreading doubt among the younger employees. He overheard Jake whispering to a group during lunch breaks, casting shadows on the committee's credibility and insinuating that Frank was trying to take control of the company again. Despite these challenges, Frank remained focused on fostering a culture of respect and safety. He organized meetings where employees could voice their concerns and propose solutions, emphasizing that everyone's input was valuable. The enthusiasm among the committee members grew, and Frank felt hopeful that they could shift the narrative within the company. As the launch date approached, the atmosphere in the office became more intense. Employees were buzzing with excitement, but Frank also sensed the pressure mounting. He began to notice small signs of strain among the team, particularly with Sarah, who was juggling the demands of the launch alongside her responsibilities as a manager. One afternoon, Frank found Sarah in her office, her head buried in her hands, clearly overwhelmed. Hey Sarah, he said gently, stepping inside. Is everything all right? She looked up, her expression a mix of stress and exhaustion. I'm just feeling the weight of everything. The launch is so close, and I'm worried about whether we've covered all our bases, she admitted. Frank nodded, understanding her concerns. Let's take a moment to review the safety protocols and ensure we're all aligned. You don't have to shoulder this alone. Together, they spent the next hour going over the launch plans, discussing how they could communicate the safety measures effectively to the entire team. Frank offered insights based on his experience, and Sarah's gratitude was palpable. I really appreciate your help, Frank. I don't know what I would do without you, she said, her tone sincere. As they wrapped up their discussion, Frank felt a renewed sense of hope. They were building a partnership based on mutual respect, and it seemed like the tides were finally shifting in his favor. However, Jake was not done trying to sabotage Frank's efforts. That evening, Frank received an anonymous email that sent a chill down his spine. The message accused him of overstepping his boundaries and trying to undermine Sarah's authority. It threatened to expose his past ownership of the company, suggesting that his motivations were self-serving. Frank's heart raced as he read the words. He had fought so hard to earn the respect of his colleagues, and now it felt like someone was attempting to tear that down. He quickly realized that Jake must be behind the email, using his influence to sow doubt and discord. Determined not to let this derail him, Frank decided to address the situation head-on. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting with the safety committee, inviting Sarah to join as well. As everyone settled in, Frank took a deep breath and spoke with clarity. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I want to discuss something important that has come to my attention," he began, his voice steady. "I received an anonymous email that questions my motives and accuses me of trying to undermine Sarah's authority. I believe this is an attempt to create division among us, and I want to address it directly." The room fell silent, a mixture of surprise and concern washing over the faces of the committee members. Frank continued, "I want to assure you all that my only goal is to create a safe and collaborative environment for everyone. I care deeply about this company and the people who work here." Sarah spoke up, her voice firm. "Frank has been an invaluable asset in guiding us through this process. We need to focus on supporting one another, not letting rumors or accusations drive us apart." As they discussed the matter further, Frank felt a sense of camaraderie emerging among the committee members. They shared their own experiences with negativity in the workplace and expressed their commitment to fostering a positive culture. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the office began to shift again. Frank and Sarah led efforts to openly address any concerns regarding safety and collaboration, emphasizing transparency among all employees. They established a shared communication platform where everyone could voice their ideas and feedback. However, Jake continued to spread doubt among the younger employees, planting seeds of discontent whenever he could. Frank felt the pressure mounting as the launch date approached, knowing that time was running out to unify the team before they revealed their product to the world. On the day of the launch, the energy in the office was electric. Employees buzzed with excitement, but Frank sensed the underlying tension. As they prepared for the presentation, he gathered the safety committee for a quick meeting. "Today is a big day, and I want to thank each of you for your hard work in making this launch possible," Frank said, his voice filled with pride. "Let's remember that we are a team, and we've worked hard to ensure that safety and collaboration are at the forefront of everything we do. Let's show everyone what we can accomplish together." As the presentation began, Frank stood at the back, watching the employees present their hard work. He felt a swell of pride in seeing them collaborate and support each other. But in the midst of the excitement, he noticed Jake hovering in the shadows, his expression dark and brooding. When the time came for Frank to step forward and speak, he felt a rush of emotions. He took a deep breath, looking out at the faces of his colleagues, some filled with anticipation, others still uncertain. "Today, we celebrate not just a product launch, but the spirit of collaboration that has brought us here. I want to acknowledge everyone's hard work and dedication, especially in ensuring our safety protocols are followed." Jake's eyes narrowed, and Frank could sense the tension mounting as he spoke. "Together, we have created something special, and it's vital that we continue to support one another. We must remember that the strength of our company lies in our commitment to each other's well-being." As Frank wrapped up his speech, the audience erupted into applause, and he felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. Despite Jake's attempts to undermine him, he had proven that respect and collaboration could prevail. However, as the cheers faded and the presentation concluded, Jake's contempt simmered beneath the surface. Frank knew that the battle was far from over. The darkness of Jake's resistance still loomed, and he needed to remain vigilant. In the coming days, Frank continued to foster a culture of respect within the office, but he also realized that he needed to address the issue of Jake head-on. He was determined not to let Jake's negativity tarnish the progress they had made. After a few days of reflection, Frank decided it was time to confront Jake directly. He sought him out in the break room one afternoon, finding him huddled with a few other employees, his tone dismissive as he spoke about the recent launch. "Hey Jake, can we talk?" Frank said, his voice steady but firm. Jake looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "What do you want, old man?" "I think we need to clear the air. I've noticed that your comments have been creating a divide in the team, and it's not helping anyone," Frank replied, unwavering. "Oh really? You think you can come in here and tell me how to act?" Jake retorted, his voice rising defensively. "You're not in charge anymore." "Maybe not, but I care about this team and I want to see us succeed." "We need to work together, not against each other," Frank said, trying to keep his tone calm. Jake scoffed, rolling his eyes. "You think you're the hero here, but you're just a relic trying to reclaim the past." Frank felt the anger rise again, but he pushed it down. "This isn't about me, Jake. It's about the future of this company. If you continue to undermine our efforts, it will hurt all of us." Jake stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You think you're untouchable just because you were once the owner. You don't know what it takes to run things now." Frank squared his shoulders, refusing to back down. "I know what it takes to lead a team, and I know that respect is the foundation of success. If you can't support that, then you're part of the problem." The tension between them crackled, and for a moment, it felt like they were on the brink of an explosive confrontation. But just as Jake opened his mouth to respond, Sarah walked in, sensing the charged atmosphere. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking between them. Frank turned to her, relief flooding him. "We were just discussing the importance of teamwork and collaboration." Jake shot Frank a glare, and Frank could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Yeah, teamwork. Something Frank seems to think he can dictate to all of us," Jake muttered. Sarah stepped forward, her expression serious. "Listen, we're all in this together. We need to find common ground and focus on making this team the best it can be. Frank has valuable insights, and we can't afford to let personal differences get in the way of our success." Jake glared at Frank before finally relenting. "Fine, but don't expect me to take orders from him." "Not orders, collaboration," Frank replied, his voice steady. "We can accomplish more together than we can alone." As Jake stormed out of the break room, Frank felt a mixture of frustration and determination. He had stood his ground, but he knew the battle with Jake was far from over. The coming days would be crucial, and he had to remain vigilant to protect the progress they had made as a team. As the sun set that evening, Frank sat at his small kitchen table, reflecting on the day's events. He realized that while he had made strides in fostering a culture of collaboration and respect, the challenge of Jake's resistance would require constant effort. Determined to stay the course, Frank decided to draft an open letter to the entire company, addressing the importance of safety, collaboration, and respect in their workplace. He wanted everyone to feel included in the conversation, to understand that their contributions mattered. The next morning, he arrived early at the office, energized and ready to share his thoughts. As he settled in, he noticed a few employees already at their desks, engaging in quiet conversations. Frank took a deep breath and composed the letter, carefully articulating his vision for a positive work culture that prioritized safety and collaboration. After he finished, he hit send and felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him. He was hopeful that the letter would resonate with his colleagues and help bridge the gaps that Jake had been attempting to widen. As the day unfolded, employees began to gather around Frank's desk, expressing their support for the letter and discussing the ideas it contained. The atmosphere felt lighter, and Frank sensed that the tide was beginning to turn once more. But in the shadows, Jake lurked, his resentment brewing. He was determined to undermine Frank's efforts, and could sense that the unity among the employees was growing stronger. Frank's resolve would soon be tested again, but for now he focused on nurturing the positive momentum he had created. As the launch day approached, Frank knew that the real challenge lay ahead. He was prepared to face whatever obstacles Jake would throw in his path, ready to fight for the respect and safety that every employee deserved. Little did he know, the storm was brewing, and Jake's next move would change everything. As the days passed leading up to the launch, Frank Reynolds could feel the pressure mounting. The atmosphere at Tech Vibe Solutions was electric with anticipation, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Jake's resentment was palpable, and Frank knew that he had to remain vigilant. The fragile camaraderie among the team was at stake, and he was determined to protect it. The morning of the launch arrived, and Frank found himself in the office early, ready to ensure that everything went smoothly. He could hear the buzz of excitement as employees trickled in, their chatter filled with enthusiasm and nervous energy. Frank set about his usual routine, but today felt different. He was no longer just the janitor but a pivotal figure in the company's future. As he moved through the office, he noticed Sarah coordinating last-minute preparations. She appeared focused, but Frank could see the hint of stress etched on her brow. He approached her desk, where she was reviewing a checklist. "Hey Sarah, is there anything I can do to help?" She looked up, gratitude flickering in her eyes. "Actually, yes. I could use a hand organizing the presentation materials for the meeting. With everything happening today, I want to make sure we're ready." "Consider it done," Frank replied, rolling up his sleeves and diving into the task. As he sorted through the materials, he could feel the excitement building among the staff, their energy contagious. Frank felt a surge of optimism, believing that their hard work would pay off. However, just as they were about to finalize the preparations, Jake entered the room, a smirk plastered across his face. He sauntered over to Sarah, leaning casually against her desk. "What's the old janitor doing here? Shouldn't he be out cleaning the floors?" he quipped, his tone dripping with mockery. Frank's heart raced as he felt the tension return, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm helping Sarah get ready for the launch. Just because I'm a janitor doesn't mean I can't contribute." "Contribute? By sorting papers? Wow, that's a real game changer," Jake shot back, laughter echoing through the room. The atmosphere shifted and Frank could see the uncertainty in the eyes of the younger employees, their excitement momentarily dulled by Jake's derision. "Jake, can you please keep this professional?" Sarah interjected, her voice firm. "We're all in this together, and we need to support each other right now." "Support? By letting him dictate how we do things?" "That's rich," Jake replied, crossing his arms defiantly. Frank stepped forward, refusing to let Jake's words go unchallenged. "What's so threatening about collaboration, Jake? It seems like you'd rather sow division than help us succeed." Jake's expression darkened, his bravado wavering for a moment. "You're making a mistake if you think I'm going to take orders from you. You may have fooled the others, but I know who you really are." Frank's heart sank at Jake's words, but he stood tall. "I'm not trying to fool anyone, Jake. I'm here to ensure that we all succeed, including you. But if you're only interested in tearing others down, you'll only hurt yourself in the end." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment the conference room doors swung open, and the rest of the team filed in, ready for the launch meeting. Frank took a deep breath, knowing that they needed to focus on the task ahead. The atmosphere shifted as everyone settled in, the anticipation palpable. Frank took his place at the back of the room, watching as Sarah took the stage. She introduced the presentation, her voice steady despite the nerves that were likely bubbling beneath the surface. As the meeting progressed, the energy in the room began to rise. Frank could see the employees rallying together, their enthusiasm building as they discussed the launch details. He felt a surge of pride, knowing that he had played a role in fostering this sense of unity. However, just as Sarah was about to unveil the new product, Jake stood up abruptly. "I don't think we should be listening to everything Frank has to say. His opinions are not based on what we do here now. And it's time we focus on the present, not the past," he declared, his voice laced with arrogance. Frank's heart sank again, but he refused to let Jake derail the meeting. "This is about our success, Jake. If you have concerns, let's address them constructively. We're all on the same team, and it's crucial that we support each other right now," he said firmly. The employees exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement with Frank. The tension in the room was thick, but Sarah stepped in. "We're here to celebrate our hard work and dedication, and I believe Frank has valuable insights that can contribute to our success." With that, the presentation resumed, and Frank watched as the employees engaged passionately in the discussion. He felt a sense of camaraderie growing, a testament to the progress they had made together. After the meeting, as the excitement of the launch filled the air, Frank was approached by several employees who congratulated him on the presentation. "You really know how to rally us together, Frank," one of them said, a smile on their face. "Thank you. I'm just glad to see everyone working as a team," Frank replied, feeling the warmth of their support. But amid the celebration, Frank couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was still plotting his next move. He kept a watchful eye on him, knowing that the confrontation was far from over. As the day wound down and the team celebrated their successful launch, Frank felt a mix of pride and apprehension. They had come so far, but he knew that Jake's resentment would not dissipate easily. The next morning, Frank decided it was time to confront Jake directly. He found Jake alone in the break room, scrolling through his phone. Frank took a deep breath, preparing himself for the confrontation. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady. Jake looked up, a smirk crossing his face. "What's the matter, old man? Afraid I'm going to take your spotlight again?" "No, I'm not afraid of you. I'm concerned about the way you're treating the team," Frank replied, holding his ground. "We've made significant progress, and your negativity is starting to take a toll. If you want to be part of this team, you need to support one another." "Support? You think I'm going to take orders from someone who's supposed to be cleaning toilets? You don't belong here anymore, Frank," Jake sneered, his confidence unwavering. Frank felt the anger rising within him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "This isn't about belonging, it's about respect. If you continue to undermine my efforts and the contributions of others, you're only hurting the team. We're all in this together, and that means we need to lift each other up." Jake stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You're making a big mistake if you think you can run this place again. I won't let you." Frank felt a chill run down his spine at Jake's words, but he stood firm. "You can't intimidate me, Jake. I care about this company, and I care about my coworkers. I will fight for a positive environment, even if it means standing up to you." As Jake opened his mouth to respond, a group of employees entered the break room, disrupting the tension between them. Frank turned, relieved for the distraction, but the underlying conflict remained. He could sense that Jake was simmering, his resentment bubbling just beneath the surface. The rest of the day unfolded with an air of anticipation. But Frank couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was plotting something more sinister. He remained focused on maintaining the momentum of the safety committee, organizing meetings to discuss the ongoing initiatives, and reinforcing the importance of teamwork. However, as the week progressed, Frank began to notice subtle changes in the office environment. Employees who had previously supported him started to waver, their confidence shaken by Jake's whispers of doubt. It was clear that Jake's influence was spreading, and Frank felt the weight of the challenge growing heavier. One afternoon, as Frank entered the break room, he overheard a group of employees discussing the recent events. They spoke in hushed tones, their expressions wary as they glanced toward Jake, who was seated at a nearby table, smirking. "Do you think we really need to listen to Frank? I mean, he's just a janitor now," one employee said quietly. Frank's heart sank at the words, but he knew he couldn't let this go unchecked. "Hey everyone," he said, stepping forward. "I just want to remind you all that we're building something special. Together, we need to support each other, and that means respecting everyone's contributions, regardless of their current role." Jake's laughter rang out, cutting through the tension. "Listen to the old man, everyone. He really thinks he's running the show now," he jeered, his mockery infectious as others snickered. "Jake, this isn't a joke," Frank replied, his voice rising slightly. "We all deserve respect, and it's vital that we work together. If we let negativity creep in, it will only hold us back." The laughter died down, but Frank could feel the doubt lingering in the room. He needed to find a way to rally the team again, to remind them of the importance of unity. As the days passed, he worked tirelessly to maintain a sense of camaraderie, but Jake's influence continued to grow. One afternoon, while preparing for another safety committee meeting, Frank received an urgent message from Sarah. She requested to meet with him immediately. As he walked to her office, his heart raced, unsure of what to expect. "Frank, I need to talk to you about something important," Sarah said as he entered her office, her expression serious. "I've been getting complaints from several employees regarding the safety committee and your role in it." Frank felt a knot form in his stomach. "Complaints? What do you mean?" "They feel that you're overstepping your bounds, that you're trying to take control of the team. It's causing a rift," she explained, her voice tinged with concern. "I'm worried that Jake's comments are influencing their perceptions." Frank's heart sank further. "I'm not trying to take control. I'm trying to ensure we prioritize safety. If they feel I'm overstepping, I need to address this. We can't afford to let negativity disrupt our progress." Sarah nodded, understanding his perspective but clearly feeling the weight of the situation. "Maybe it's time for you to take a step back and let others lead the discussion. If we can show that this is a collective effort, it might help mend the rift." Frank took a deep breath, trying to process her suggestion. "You're right, I need to listen to their concerns. If stepping back will help unify the team, I'm willing to do that. But I can't let Jake's influence undermine our safety initiatives." As he left Sarah's office, he felt a mix of determination and uncertainty. He knew he had to find a way to restore confidence among the employees while still emphasizing the importance of safety. The challenge ahead felt daunting, but Frank was resolute. That afternoon, he decided to hold an open forum, inviting employees to share their thoughts on safety and teamwork without fear of judgment. He wanted to create a space where everyone felt empowered to voice their opinions. As the forum approached, Frank felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Would they come? Would Jake's influence hold too much sway? Despite his concerns, he prepared the room, hopeful that the employees would seize this opportunity for open dialogue. To his relief, a solid number of employees attended the forum. As they settled in, Frank felt the weight of their collective presence. He began the session by sharing his vision for safety and collaboration, encouraging everyone to express their thoughts openly. "What do you feel about the safety measures we've discussed? Are there areas where you think we can improve?" Frank asked, his tone inviting and warm. One employee spoke up hesitantly. "I think we need to ensure that everyone is aware of the safety protocols. Maybe we could have regular training sessions to keep it fresh in our minds." "That's a great idea," Frank responded, nodding enthusiastically. Training sessions would help reinforce the importance of safety in our day-to-day operations. As the discussion continued, several more employees voiced their opinions, sharing their experiences and suggestions. Frank felt a renewed sense of hope as he saw the team beginning to rally around their shared commitment to safety and collaboration. However, as the forum unfolded, Jake's shadow loomed over the gathering. Frank could feel the tension as Jake lingered at the back of the room, a silent observer, and his presence hung like a cloud, threatening to overshadow their progress. At one point, Jake interjected with a snide comment. "What's the point of all this? You really think a bunch of meetings will change how we operate? We're a tech company, not a daycare, he scoffed. Frank turned to him, refusing to let Jake derail the conversation. We're a team, Jake, and teamwork is essential for our success. If we ignore safety, we jeopardize everything we've built. Jake rolled his eyes, clearly unrepentant. Whatever you say, old man. Good luck trying to convince anyone of that. Frank took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay focused on the positives. He shifted his attention back to the group, encouraging them to continue sharing their thoughts. As the forum concluded, Frank felt a surge of accomplishment. They had made significant progress in fostering an open dialogue, and despite Jake's attempts to undermine him, the team was beginning to unite. However, Frank knew that Jake was far from finished, and the upcoming weeks would be critical in maintaining their momentum. As Frank headed home that evening, he felt both hopeful and apprehensive. He had navigated the challenges with determination, but he sensed that Jake's resistance was building to a breaking point. The winds of change were swirling around them, and Frank knew he had to remain vigilant to protect the progress they had made as a team. Little did he know that Jake was already plotting his next move, one that would put everything Frank had worked for on the line. The battle for respect and safety was far from over, and Frank was prepared to fight for the future of TechVB Solutions, no matter the cost. The days that followed the open forum were filled with a mix of optimism and uncertainty at TechVB Solutions. Frank had managed to cultivate a spirit of collaboration among the employees, and for the first time, he sensed a unity growing within the team. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was biding his time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The morning of the next safety committee meeting arrived, and Frank felt a surge of anticipation as he walked through the office. Employees greeted him with smiles and nods of acknowledgement, their renewed enthusiasm palpable. It was clear that they had begun to see the value of teamwork and open communication. However, he knew that Jake's presence loomed large, and he needed to stay vigilant. As the committee gathered in the conference room, Frank took a moment to appreciate the diverse group assembled. Employees from various departments sat around the table, eager to contribute their insights. Sarah entered the room, her expression a mix of determination and anxiety. "Thanks for coming, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "I think we've made significant progress in fostering a culture of safety and collaboration, and I want to hear your thoughts on how we can keep this momentum going." Frank nodded, feeling encouraged by the enthusiasm in the room. He could see the team was ready to tackle the challenges ahead, and he was determined to facilitate a productive discussion. As they delved into the meeting, employees began sharing their ideas, building on the foundation they had established. Frank contributed his thoughts, emphasizing the importance of regular safety drills and ongoing training to ensure that everyone felt confident in their roles. But just as the conversation was gaining momentum, the door swung open, and Jake strolled in, an air of arrogance surrounding him. The chatter in the room quieted, and Frank felt a knot form in his stomach. Jake sauntered over to the table, casually leaning against it as if he owned the place. "Hope I'm not interrupting your little safety club," Jake said with a smirk. "I just came to see what the old janitor has to say this time." "Jake, this is a committee meeting," Sarah replied, her tone firm. "We're discussing important matters related to safety and our upcoming projects." "Right, safety? I'm sure Frank has a lot to offer on that front," Jake said, rolling his eyes. "Maybe he can tell us how to mop up spills effectively while we're at it." Frank clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He wanted to challenge Jake's dismissive attitude, but he knew he had to maintain composure for the sake of the team. "Jake, we're trying to focus on how we can improve safety protocols. If you have constructive feedback, we'd like to hear it." Jake smirked, leaning closer. "Constructive? All I see is a bunch of people wasting their time. You're not running the company anymore, Frank. Maybe it's time to let go of your old ways." Frank's heart raced, but he refused to let Jake's taunts derail the meeting. "My experience has value, and it's important that we learn from it. We can't ignore safety just because it's inconvenient." The tension in the room thickened, and Frank could see a flicker of uncertainty among some of the employees. He needed to regain their confidence and reinforce the message that their collective efforts mattered. "Let's remember why we're here," Frank said, his voice steady. "We're a team, and we're working toward a common goal. Our safety is paramount, and it requires all of us to participate and engage. It's not about titles, it's about respect." Sarah nodded in agreement, her gaze directed at Jake. "We need to focus on creating a positive work environment where everyone feels valued. Frank has been a crucial part of that process." "Sure, keep coddling him," Jake retorted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But don't come crying to me when the real work hits the fan. I'll be busy doing my job, not cleaning up after someone else's failures." As Jake stepped back, Frank could feel the frustration boiling within him. "You can mock me all you want, Jake, but I'm here to ensure that we don't become complacent. The success of this company depends on every one of us pulling together." The meeting continued, but Frank couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was plotting something. He watched as Jake leaned back, a calculating expression on his face, and Frank knew he had to be prepared for whatever was coming next. In the following days, Frank kept his focus on fostering a culture of respect and collaboration. He spent time mentoring employees, encouraging them to share their ideas and participate in discussions about safety protocols. The atmosphere gradually improved, and Frank felt a renewed sense of purpose. However, Jake's attempts to undermine Frank's influence persisted. He began to circulate rumors among the younger employees, suggesting that Frank was trying to take over the company again. "You all know he was the boss once, right?" Jake would say, his tone laced with mockery. "What makes you think he isn't trying to worm his way back into control?" Frank sensed the growing divide and the doubt seeping into the minds of the team. He knew that he had to confront Jake directly to protect the progress they had made. One evening, as Frank prepared to leave the office, he spotted Jake lingering in the shadows of the break room. Frank took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. He approached Jake, determination in his eyes. "We need to talk, Jake," Frank said, his voice steady. Jake looked up, feigning innocence. "Oh? About what? Your latest safety lecture?" "No. About how your words are affecting the team," Frank replied, keeping his tone firm but measured. "You're spreading negativity, and it's causing rifts that we can't afford right now." "Negativity? I'm just telling it like it is. You think people want to listen to a washed-up janitor?" Jake challenged, crossing his arms defiantly. Frank felt the anger rising again but held his ground. "This isn't about me, it's about us as a team. If we can't support one another, we're going to fail. The success of this launch relies on all of us working together." Jake sneered. "You really think you can unite everyone with your little pep talks? People see right through you. You're just trying to cling to whatever power you think you have left." Frank took a step closer, refusing to let Jake intimidate him. "I may not have the same title, but I have a wealth of experience and knowledge that can help us succeed. If you think tearing others down will elevate you, you're mistaken. We all have a role to play here." At that moment, Sarah entered the break room, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Just a discussion about team dynamics," Frank replied, his gaze never leaving Jake. "We need to focus on supporting one another, not undermining our progress." Jake rolled his eyes, clearly frustrated. "Whatever you say, old man. Just remember, it's not my fault if people start questioning your authority." As Jake stormed out of the break room, Frank felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He had stood his ground, but the battle with Jake was far from over. In the following days, Frank continued to engage with the employees, reinforcing the importance of safety and collaboration. He organized more forums, providing a space for everyone to voice their thoughts and concerns openly. Gradually, he noticed a renewed sense of confidence among the team, and the spirit of camaraderie seemed to strengthen. But Jake's influence lingered like a shadow. Frank could feel the tension brewing beneath the surface, and he knew that they were approaching a breaking point. He had to find a way to confront Jake once and for all. As the weeks progressed, Frank decided to call an all-hands meeting, inviting everyone to discuss the recent events and reaffirm the importance of teamwork. He believed that a united front could help dispel any lingering doubts and reaffirm their commitment to safety and collaboration. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Employees filed into the conference room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Frank took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Thank you all for coming," Frank began, his voice steady. "Today I want to address some of the challenges we've faced recently and reinforce our commitment to working together as a team." As he spoke, Frank could see the faces of his colleagues reflecting concern and determination. "I know there have been tensions, but I believe that together, we can overcome any obstacles. Our success depends on our ability to communicate and collaborate effectively." He looked directly at Jake, who was seated in the back, arms crossed. "We need to remember that we are all in this together. Each of us has a valuable role to play, and we can't afford to let personal differences hinder our progress." Jake leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You really think this is going to change anything? People are going to see right through your little speech," he interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Jake, this isn't about personal vendettas. This is about ensuring that we all feel safe and respected in our workplace, Frank replied, his voice rising slightly. If we allow negativity to prevail, we will all suffer the consequences. The tension in the room thickened as Frank's words hung in the air. He could see the uncertainty in the eyes of some employees, but he pressed on. I urge everyone to support one another and focus on our shared goals. We have the opportunity to build something great, but it requires commitment from each and every one of us. As Frank continued, he felt a sense of determination wash over him. The energy in the room shifted, and he could see employees nodding in agreement, their resolve strengthening. They were beginning to unite, and Frank felt a swell of hope. But just as the meeting was gaining momentum, Jake stood up abruptly. I'm done pretending this is a team effort when you're trying to take control. Frank, he declared, his voice filled with defiance. You think you can come in here and dictate how we run things? You're wrong. Frank took a deep breath, prepared for the confrontation. This isn't about control, it's about collaboration. If you can't support that, then maybe it's time for you to reevaluate your place in this team. Reevaluate? That's rich coming from you, Jake sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. You think you're untouchable just because you have a few years of experience. But guess what? People are tired of you trying to play the victim. Frank felt the anger rise again, but he forced himself to stay calm. This isn't about being a victim. It's about ensuring that we all feel safe and respected in our workplace. If you can't see that, then you're part of the problem. As Jake opened his mouth to respond, a wave of employees began to speak up, voicing their support for Frank. We need to work together, not against each other, one employee said. Frank's been here for us when we needed guidance. Yeah, we're a team. And we shouldn't let negativity tear us apart, another chimed in, their voices filled with determination. Frank felt a surge of gratitude as the employees rallied around him. It was clear that they were beginning to see through Jake's bravado, and the tide was turning in his favor. As the meeting drew to a close, Frank felt a renewed sense of hope. They had confronted the challenges head-on, and despite Jake's resistance, the team was beginning to unite. However, he knew that the battle was not over. Jake would not back down easily. In the following days, Frank worked tirelessly to maintain the momentum they had built. He organized team-building activities and safety drills, reinforcing the importance of collaboration and respect. He saw employees engaging with one another, sharing ideas, and actively participating in the discussions. But just as things began to stabilize, Frank received an anonymous tip that sent a chill down his spine. The message warned him that Jake was planning to escalate his efforts to undermine Frank's authority, and Frank knew he had to prepare for the storm that was coming. That evening, as he left the office, Frank felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He had worked hard to foster a positive environment, but he knew that Jake's animosity would not dissipate easily. He needed to confront Jake before things spiraled out of control. The next day, Frank approached Jake in the break room, ready to confront him. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady but firm. Jake looked up, feigning innocence. About what? Your latest failure to control the narrative? No, Jake. This is about the impact your behavior is having on the team. You can't continue to spread negativity and undermine our efforts, Frank replied, his voice rising with determination. Jake leaned closer, his voice low and threatening. You think you can run this place again? You're a joke, Frank. People are starting to see you for who you really are, a washed-up old man trying to cling to the past. Frank's heart raced, but he refused to let fear take hold. I'm not trying to reclaim control. I'm trying to ensure that we create a culture of respect. If you can't support that, then you're in the wrong place. At that moment, the tension escalated, and Frank could feel the eyes of the other employees on him. They were watching the confrontation unfold, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Go ahead, Frank. Keep pretending that you're making a difference, Jake sneered. But we all know you're just trying to stay relevant. Frank took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This isn't about me, it's about us as a team. If you continue to undermine our efforts, you're only hurting yourself in the end. Jake's expression darkened, and Frank sensed that he was pushing Jake to his limits. You're making a big mistake, old man. I won't let you ruin everything I've worked for. With that, Jake stormed out of the break room, leaving Frank feeling a mix of frustration and determination. He knew he had to stay focused on the positive changes they had made, but he couldn't ignore the threat Jake posed. As the days unfolded, Frank continued to foster a culture of collaboration and respect, but he remained acutely aware of Jake's looming presence. He needed to protect the progress they had made and prepare for whatever Jake had planned. Finally, the day came when Jake decided to escalate his tactics. During a safety drill, Frank noticed that Jake had deliberately sabotaged the procedure, failing to inform several employees about the drill's timing. When the alarm went off, chaos erupted as employees scrambled in confusion. Frank quickly stepped in, directing people to the nearest exits and ensuring that everyone remained calm. As he worked to restore order, he spotted Jake standing off to the side, a smug smile on his face. "Nice job, Frank. Looks like your safety measures are really working," Jake shouted mockingly, crossing his arms. Frank felt his blood boil as he confronted Jake. "This isn't a joke, Jake. You're putting people's lives at risk." "Maybe they should learn to follow directions," Jake replied, shrugging off the situation. "Not everyone needs you holding their hands." Once the drill concluded and everyone was safely outside, Frank felt a surge of determination. He knew that he had to confront Jake once and for all. The team's safety was at stake, and he couldn't allow Jake to undermine their efforts any longer. "Jake, we need to talk," Frank said, his voice low but firm as he approached Jake after the drill. Jake looked up, feigning innocence. "What now? Another lecture on teamwork?" "No, this is about your behavior and its impact on the team," Frank replied, his tone serious. "What you did today was unacceptable, and you know it." Jake shrugged, a smirk on his face. "I was just trying to see if everyone knew what to do in an emergency. It's not my fault if they can't follow instructions." Frank felt a surge of anger. This isn't about testing people, it's about creating a safe work environment. If you can't respect that, then you're going to hurt yourself in the long run. "Respect, please, you've lost all credibility around here. People see you for who you really are," Jake shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Frank took a deep breath, knowing he had to stay calm. "You need to stop undermining our efforts, Jake. If you continue to sabotage the team, you'll only hurt yourself in the end." As Jake opened his mouth to respond, Sarah stepped in, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between them. "We were just having a discussion about today's drill," Frank replied, his voice steady. "But it's clear that Jake doesn't understand the importance of our safety measures." "Is that true, Jake?" Sarah pressed, her gaze steady. Jake shrugged, his bravado wavering. "I just think we should focus on getting the job done, not on holding hands through every little thing." Sarah's expression hardened. "Jake, this isn't about coddling anyone. It's about ensuring that we're all prepared for emergencies and working together as a team. If you can't support that, then we need to reassess your role here." Frank felt a surge of gratitude for Sarah's support. It was clear that the team was beginning to rally around their shared commitment to safety and respect, and it felt like the tide was finally turning in their favor. As the days unfolded, Frank continued to foster an environment of collaboration, but he remained vigilant against Jake's attempts to sow discord. He organized more safety drills, reinforcing the importance of teamwork and communication. Slowly but surely, he began to see the employees rallying around the core values they had established together. But just as it seemed they were gaining ground, Jake hatched a plan to undermine Frank's efforts once more. He began to circulate rumors that Frank was trying to manipulate the team for his own gain, claiming that he wanted to reclaim control of the company. Frank could feel the tension mounting again, and he knew that he had to confront Jake directly. The stakes had never been higher, and he couldn't afford to let Jake's negativity undermine everything they had worked for. Finally, the day came when Frank decided it was time to put an end to Jake's antics once and for all. He organized an all-hands meeting, inviting every employee to discuss the recent events and reaffirm their commitment to safety and collaboration. As the day of the meeting arrived, Frank felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Employees gathered in the conference room, their expressions reflecting a blend of curiosity and apprehension. Frank stood at the front, ready to address the team. "Thank you all for coming," Frank began, his voice steady. "Today I want to address the challenges we've faced and reaffirm our commitment to working together as a team. We've made significant progress, but I'm aware that there are some lingering doubts." As he spoke, Frank could see Jake sitting in the back, his expression defiant. "I know that there have been tensions in the office, and I want to emphasize that we need to focus on creating a positive work environment. Each of you has valuable contributions to make, and we can't let negativity tear us apart." Frank continued, discussing the importance of teamwork and respect, and he could feel the energy in the room beginning to shift. Employees began to nod in agreement, their confidence growing as Frank reinforced the message that their collective efforts mattered. However, just as Frank was gaining momentum, Jake stood up, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Really, Frank? You think your little speech is going to change anything? People are tired of your lectures?" Frank felt the frustration rising again, but he pressed on. "This isn't about me, it's about us as a team. If we want to succeed, we need to support one another, and that starts with creating an environment of respect and collaboration. Jake scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. You're just a janitor, Frank. What do you know about running a company? Frank took a deep breath, determined to maintain his composure. I may not have the same title I once did, but I have a wealth of experience that can help us succeed. If you can't see that, then you're missing the point. The room was tense as employees exchanged glances, and Frank could feel the uncertainty lingering in the air. But just as Jake opened his mouth to retort, several employees spoke up, voicing their support for Frank. We need to work together, one employee said. Frank has been here for us, guiding us through these challenges. Yeah, we're a team, and we shouldn't let negativity tear us apart, another chimed in. Frank felt a surge of gratitude as the employees rallied around him. The tide was turning, and he could sense the momentum shifting in his favor. They were beginning to see through Jake's bravado, and the unity within the team was growing stronger. As the meeting concluded, Frank felt a renewed sense of hope. They had confronted the challenges head-on, and despite Jake's attempts to undermine him, the team was beginning to unite. However, Frank knew that the battle was not over. Jake would not back down easily. In the coming days, Frank continued to focus on fostering a culture of collaboration and respect. He organized team-building activities, reinforcing the importance of safety and communication. But just as it seemed they were gaining ground, Jake made one last attempt to undermine Frank's authority. He gathered a group of employees, spreading false rumors about Frank's intentions and questioning his commitment to the team. Frank felt the weight of the challenge bearing down on him. He knew he had to confront Jake directly, to put an end to his schemes once and for all. That evening, Frank found Jake alone in the break room once again. The atmosphere felt charged, and Frank steeled himself for the confrontation. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady. Jake looked up, feigning innocence. About what? Another lecture on teamwork. No, this is about your behavior and its impact on the team, Frank replied, his tone firm. You can't continue to spread negativity and undermine our efforts. Jake smirked, leaning back against the counter. You think you're so important just because you used to run this place. But guess what? People are starting to see you for who you really are. Frank felt a surge of anger but fought to maintain his composure. This isn't about me, it's about the team. If you can't support that, then you're in the wrong place. As Jake opened his mouth to respond, a wave of employees entered the break room, interrupting the confrontation. Frank turned, relieved for the distraction, but he knew the underlying conflict remained. The following days unfolded with a mix of determination and anxiety. Frank focused on fostering a positive work environment, engaging with employees, and reinforcing the importance of safety. He could see the team beginning to rally around their shared commitment, but Jake's presence still lingered. In the end, Frank knew that the real battle lay ahead. He had fought for the respect and safety of his coworkers, but he would need to confront Jake one final time to ensure that their progress wouldn't be undone. As he left the office that evening, Frank felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He had come so far, and he couldn't allow Jake's negativity to derail everything they had worked for. Little did he know, the storm was brewing, and Jake's next move would change everything.